الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. So this is a workshop that we do annually, and we did it last year, we did it the year before. This is, of course, from the basics of Islam. It is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. So this is something which should not be a very strange or foreign to anyone, but rather Zakah is one of the 5 pillars. We must do it every year. And I don't see any poor people around here who don't have to pay Zakah. So it should be something that all of us should be familiar with. The first thing I want to mention is this book, which is a very good resource, and you can see that on the website. I have an actual copy here, which I will not give to anybody because people take it, don't bring it back. This is a sheikh by the name of Sheikh Joe Bradford. He is a graduate of Medina University. He's done a lot of studies in Islamic finance, in modern Islamic finance. And the link that is there, this QR code, you can actually book a 15, 20-minute call with him. If you have a very detail-oriented, very expensive question where if you get the right answer, you might end up saving thousands of dollars. This could be a very good thing where you can feel comfortable saying that, feeling that I'm getting an answer from someone who is an expert in the field, okay? So in order for these shuyukh to value to make sure that their time is not wasted, they've put a little bit of a cost to book a call with them, like, $50 for like a 20-minute conversation or a 15-minute conversation. It's well worth it. Trust me that it will get you an answer from an expert in the field, and it will also not be wasting their time, because a lot of people, they're not efficient with their time. When you book a call and you pay for it, you're going to be on time. You're going to send your question in detail beforehand. So he could be prepared, he could come and get business done. What's better than that, okay? So inshallah, please look into that. Also look into buying this book and keeping it with you, because if you ever need to brush up, this is a good guide. It's called a Simple Zakat Guide, written in a very easy to understand way. Another sheikh that is an expert in Islamic finance is Sheikh Ma'an al-Qudha. This is his link if you want to contact him for a personal call, and you can get your specific answer. Sometimes people come to me and they are asking me questions where it's a matter of millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I tell them, look, just pay, this $50, $60 or whatever the case is, and get an answer from the sheikh who is an expert, and get an answer in writing. Okay, get an answer in writing. So from here on, you can just sleep on it. You never have to worry whether I got something right or wrong. What did the sheikh say? Did I understand it right or wrong? So you can get a specific ruling for your situation by contacting the shuyukh that are experts in the field, and they are nearby as well. But here is a way that you can reach them easily. The next thing, inshallah, we're going to look at is a Zakah calculator. So this is from a website called Zakah Foundation of America. If you go there, right on top, but I put a link there. It's a calculator where you go there and it tells you how much money do you have in your account. So you put in the number, right? How much money do you have in your account? You put in that number. How much money do you have in your retirement fund? How much jewelry do you own? The value of it. And it will ask you all of these clear, straightforward questions. You just plug in your numbers. And at the bottom, it will give you the amount of zakah that you need to pay. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when you give your zakah, which we'll discuss a little bit later, you need to do some due diligence as to who you're giving it to. Okay? Meaning that everybody is saying they are supporting the people of Gaza. But the people of Gaza are still starving. Okay? So, inshallah, we all need to do a better job at supporting our brothers in Gaza, in Syria, in Bangladesh, in the Rohingya brothers, Afghanistan, in Morocco, like all over the place. There was a report that came out on NPR where they said that there were 54 organizations that were claiming to sponsor one refugee camp in for Syrian refugees in the Turkey side. And they went there, and this camp was in horrendous condition. And all 54 organizations were collecting money to pay for housing, for roads, for food, and all of these type of things for these people. So just because somebody has a very nice marketing techniques doesn't necessarily mean that they deserve your zakat money. Okay? So I'm telling you this, that even though I'm telling you to go to the website of Zakah Foundation, if you decide to give your money to Zakah Foundation of America, do your due diligence. Okay, that's one. Number two is that if Zakah Foundation is collecting your zakah, which is also the way that their salaries come from and their expenses and everything like that, do you think that the bias of this organization is to tell you more zakah or less zakah? What? More. The more zakah they tell you, the more you're likely to give, okay? So nothing wrong with maybe they have tried their best, but you have to understand that when there's a conflict of interest, you need to do independent verification. If it still turns out to be that, and you want to give it to them, fine, no problem. But just keep these things in mind that, sometimes, not sometimes, every time, we all have our biases, okay? So, this is still a good tool for a person to go and easily figure out, okay, what's the general, ballpark, even more specifically, more precisely, what is the zakah that I need to give? And remember, if you give zakah more than you're supposed to, no problem. But if you give zakah less than you're supposed to, then you are liable and sinful in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right. The next thing is zakah workshop from, actually this is not from last year, it's from 2 years ago, where we did a whole 2 hours session. We went into all the details. Today I went back to the same slides and I deleted a whole lot of stuff and kept stuff very simple and straightforward. If you want the detailed version of it, this is the link for it. And you can also find it on the Masjid YouTube, which is called Zakah Simplified. All right. Now, if you don't get any resources there, then this is the way to get in contact with me, Imam at icbrushycreek.org. Or if you go to the IC Brushy Creek website and you go to the Imam page, you can book an appointment with me. But again, I want to tell you that I am not an expert in Islamic finance. So I might be able to kind of give you a general idea, but since I'm not an expert, I might end up telling you, brother, your question is above my pay grade. And you need to go to the experts in this matter, so go and get your question there. So it might be better for you to just email me first if you have a specific question. I can either tell you, I can send you an answer from an expert that has already been given, or I can send you to the expert, inshallah. All right, moving on. Meaning of zakah. There's not a good translation in the English language for the word zakah just by itself, but there are 3 good translations for it, and all of them apply to the concept of zakah. It is a purification for the person who gives it. It's a purification for your money. It is also increase in your money. So your impurities are purified, and then your money is going to, inshallah, experience an increase by the barakah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the one who gives it is worthy of praise for doing the right thing. Okay, so increase, praise, and purification. All of these are meanings of zakah, and all of them apply to different aspects of establishing the ruling, the command of zakah. Who is zakah an obligation on? Person must be Muslim. So non-Muslims, even if they're living in a Muslim land, don't have to give zakah. Unfortunately, I know some Muslim countries where at a certain time in the year, they take zakah from every bank account. And of course, that zakah goes in the pockets of the politicians, but they have to establish zakah. Astaghfirullah, how can they skip that? So it doesn't matter, Muslim, non-Muslim. If you have a bank account, you have money there, they just take zakah from there. Okay, so it's only upon Muslims. You must have complete ownership and access to the wealth that you're giving zakah on. Otherwise, if you don't have complete ownership, somebody has promised you that I am going to give you this much money. But that promise is a, inshallah promise. You're waiting and waiting and waiting. There's no zakah on it until the money comes to you. Also, if you have the money but you don't have access to it, the money is yours, but for some reason something happened and it got locked in some way where you can't access it. Sometimes it's international borders. Sometimes it's like a government issue that they lock certain accounts. Sometimes it might be that the money is yours, but somehow you can't get to it. Okay, you just don't have access to it. In this case, you're not being sinful for missing your zakah, since you don't have access to the money on which you have to give zakah on. And it will not even be an obligation upon you in that case. The wealth should have the ability to grow. What this basically means is that you don't have to pay zakah on the plates in your house. You don't have to give zakah on the sofas in your house. You don't have to give zakah on table and chair in your house, on the carpet in your house. But if you have a warehouse full of carpets that you bought in order to sell and make a profit on, you have to give zakah on that. But the stuff that you're using, that's your personal usage, home stuff, you might have, for example, a car that you're driving, no zakah on that. But if you bought a car in order to sell and make a profit from it, then there is zakah on it. Also, passage of 1 lunar year in most cases. There are some exceptions to this. But zakah will only be applicable on a person where they have a certain amount of wealth and 1 lunar year has passed on it. So one of the things that our teacher said is that look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages economic activity. It was called stimulus package. If money comes to you, if it doesn't sit with you, you spend it. Whether you're buying stuff, whether you're investing, whether you are traveling, whatever it is that you're doing, if you spend it before the year comes, you don't have to give zakah on it. Okay? Because the purpose of money is that it should be rolling around in people's hands. As it's rolling, it's benefiting people. If it's sitting under your mattress or in your bank account, then it's not benefiting anyone. That's when you have to give zakah if it's been sitting for a whole year. So the Prophet ﷺ told us that protect your money from zakah, in the sense that if your money is just sitting in the bank, every year you're just paying zakah on it, it's going to get eaten up like that. Rather, invest it. Okay, get it moving, and you don't have to pay zakah in a halal way. So you know what's called tax avoidance and tax evasion. Tax evasion is illegal. If you are liable for giving zakah and you don't give zakah, then that's a sin. But if you actually move your money like honestly and you are not letting it sit, you're constantly reinvesting, something comes from here, you invest it there. In this case, you can avoid zakah, and it's not sinful because by the way you're getting the money out, somebody is getting help. Somebody is getting food on their table because your money is rolling around in the economy. Also, freedom. So if a person is not free, back in the days it was a slave, and a slave did not own anything that he owned. Anything that the slave had belonged to the owner of the slave. So it was the responsibility of the owner to pay the zakah, not the slave. In our case, I was thinking that it's not really applicable in our time, but then I was thinking, prisoners, if somebody's in prison, but these days, prisoners generally have access to making money moves and bank accounts and withdrawing and depositing money. So in a way they do have, but they probably won't have enough money in many cases to have to pay zakah. Wallahu alam. An entire lunar year is an Islamic year, a 12-month of the lunar calendar. If a person calculates their zakah on a solar date, so let's say instead of calculating your zakah on Muharram 1st, you calculate your zakah on January 1st. The difference is 10 extra days, right? So if it's 10 extra days, in this case, you have to pay zakah a little bit higher for those 10 extra days, which is 2.575%. That's the rate that you would calculate on. And if you're doing this, ideally you need to do it before and not after. meaning before your lunar date. But don't worry too much about that. It's just 10 days. It's not a big deal in a bigger scheme of things. The exceptions to the lunar year is whatever comes out of the land which cannot last for 1 year. Okay, so if you are growing walnuts, if the walnuts are going to sit in your warehouse for 1 year, they will lose all value. So as soon as they are harvested, you need to now eat them, sell them, trade them, whatever you need to do. So you're going to pay the zakah on it right then and there in the beginning at the harvest. And it's going to be a higher percentage depending on how it's watered. And the growth of capital through profit or birth, their whole is that of the origin. This is basically saying that if you have $1 million in your bank account, in your retirement fund, let's say, and during the last year, the million became 1.1 million. Now, this $100,000 extra that you gained during the last year, some of it happened in January, some of it happened in February, some of it happened in March, some of it happened in June, some of it happened in August. But because this growth is from the original capital itself, in this case, at the zakah due date, you'll just look at the total amount and you will pay zakah on that. Is that clear? Now, if you got $100,000 from another source, in June, so zakah on that 100,000 will only be due after 1 lunar year, which will be June. Now, who is going to keep track of all the money coming in from different sources? MashaAllah, I can see many millionaires here, multiple sources of income, money coming from left and right. So in this case, it's easier to just pick one date and say, look, even if I'm going to pay zakah on money which only came to me 6 months ago, it doesn't matter to me. In this case, I will end up paying extra, but I will not be paying less. Okay? So let's hold the questions. Maybe your question might be answered. So let me get through the slides and then we'll take the questions. Write them down so you don't forget, inshallah. Zakah is not related to Ramadan. The reason why we're doing it around this time is because it's a common misconception that people have. They think about zakah in Ramadan, and they think that if I pay my zakah in Ramadan, then I will get more reward for giving zakah. And this is, it's not necessarily correct, because zakah is an obligation upon you. And you have to do it when the year completes on your wealth. So let's say you got a ton of money last year, 2 months before Ramadan. You wait until this Ramadan to pay your zakah. You were sinful for the 2 months for delaying your zakah. And the people whose right it was that you were holding for 2 extra months, it's like you were, in a way, oppressing them. Okay? So keep in mind that if this is the case, what you would do is that you would say, you know what? I will pay my zakah on time when it is due, and then I will maybe pay a little bit extra for the 2 months, even though I don't have to, in order to bring my zakah due date to Ramadan, if that's what you want. But you don't have to do that. And the best thing is for you to give your zakah on its due time, and it doesn't matter when it is. It doesn't matter when it is. If it is before Ramadan, don't hold it until Ramadan. That's not nice to the people who need it. Imagine like you're, you work for a Muslim guy, and he says, you know what, all the money that I'm paying my employees, inshallah, it's rewardable for me, right? And your paycheck is due 1 week before Ramadan. So he says, let me delay it a little bit, so I can give it to the employees on the first minute of Ramadan, so I could get extra reward for it. You would not be happy about that. So, all right. Now, what kind of currencies zakah is due on? Zakah is due, of course, on any currency which is based in gold or silver. Now, most currencies today are supposed to be representatives of some sort of gold. Now, they're moving to a different direction where it is not really representative, but the scholars have not changed the standard. They still apply the rulings of gold and silver on cash money, okay? So we would still follow that until it is updated by the scholars. Also merchandise that you have for sale. So again, let's say that you received a container of luxury fabric. And this luxury fabric is for you to sell to your customers in the textile industry in order, you make money from that. You bring in containers and you sell it. Now, something happened and one container is sitting with you and it's been a year. If 1 year passes on it, then you have to pay zakah on this container of luxury fabric. It has to be paid. Now, how would you pay it? Would you pay it in the form of money? Or would you pay it in the form of luxury fabric that is in that container? What do you think? Whatever is more beneficial for the people. Okay? Whatever is more beneficial for the people. If you can give it from the actual product and it's actually beneficial to people, then you should give it from there. But let's say you are selling something which is not beneficial to people. You have a container full of plastic pellets. If you give zakah in the form of plastic pellets to a poor person who needs to eat, he can't eat that, he can't wear that, he can't sleep in it, can't do anything with it. So in this case, you would give it in equivalent value of money. But if it is the item that is itself beneficial to the poor people, then you give it in that form. Not common in our time, but some people do still have it, which is free grazing domesticated livestock, which is sheep, cows, camels, things of that sort. We're not going to go into a lot of details about that because, again, that's not common for most people. But some people, they do have this type of stuff. So they have a specific question. Inshallah, we can maybe talk on the side. Interesting thing is that you have zakah on debts. If people owe you money, or you owe money to people, it can make a difference in your zakah. If you owe money to people, and you're trying to pay, then you can deduct that from your zakah. Saying, okay, I'm going to give it in zakah, and if this is going to reduce my amount to such a low level where a zakah is not applicable to me, then that's what it will happen. If people owe you money, then you would calculate that as part of money in your pocket if you expect that that money is coming back to you and you still have some chance of getting it back. If you don't think that money is going to come back to you, person is defaulted or you're not sure if it's ever going to come back, the guy has been making excuses for years. In this case, you don't pay zakah on it. It's as if you lost that money. Now, if after 3, 4, 5 years he comes back and gives you, then one group of scholars, they say that you would pay zakah for every year that you missed on that money. Another group says no. They said that in this case, you would count it as if this money was lost, it was gone forever. And after 4 or 5 years, you got a new sum of money. You add it to the rest of your money and you pay zakah on it if it all reaches the nisab, if it's been there for 1 year. Okay? Livestock, agriculture, and what comes out of the land is something that we're not going to go in a lot of details because a lot of people don't do that. But again, if you have oil in your land, then there is zakah on that. If you end up digging your land and you end up finding a box full of gold coins, you have to pay zakah on that. If you end up getting a lottery ticket, you didn't buy it. Buying is not halal. But somebody gave it to you and it won. Now, this is kind of like you found a treasure trove in the land full of gold coins. Now, the first thing you have to do is when you get that money, you have to pay 20% zakah on it. The rest is yours for you to keep and enjoy, and it's halal, inshallah. Don't forget your imam, please. All right, nisab. So, zakah is only due on those items in which we talked about where zakah is, if it reaches a minimum threshold. If you are broke, you don't have much money in your pocket, you don't have much savings, you're struggling to survive, you don't have to pay zakah. You can receive zakah. Okay? But if you have nisab, which is the minimum amount which we are going to look at right now, only then you have to pay zakah if this nisab stays with you for an entire year. Okay? So what is the zakah? So 1 year ago, when we did this presentation, the nisab of gold was $5,860, which is equal to 85 grams of gold. And the zakah of silver, or the nisab of silver, was $457, which is 585 grams of silver. In today's price, or actually about 2-3 weeks ago, as of January 13th, the gold is $7,498, so about $7,500. So look, it went up about $1,700. And silver, it went up to $588 from $457. So if you, now in this case, where do you pay zakah if you have more than $7,500? Or do you pay zakah if you have more than $588? What do you think? $588. So you would pay on whatever is the lower. Why? Because it will be beneficial to the poor. If you pay on the higher amount, it will be beneficial for the rich people. And zakah is for the poor people, right? So, subhanAllah, look at the discrepancy between the two. In the time of the Prophet, they were equal. In the time of the Prophet, if you valued it, they would both be exactly the same amount. 585 grams of silver and 85 grams of gold was the same amount, but now it has gone in this way. So you would pay the zakah on the lower amount because it will be beneficial to the poor people. So the simple, what you see here on your screen is a simple person, a new Muslim, doesn't have a lot of money, new Muslim, or someone who doesn't have a lot of money. Simple way of giving zakah, calculating your zakah, is how many dollars does he have that are in his possession for one complete year, lunar year, 354 days. If the amount reaches the nisab of silver, which is $588, so if anybody has more than $588 for the last whole year or more, then they would pay how much money from it? 2.5%. So who can quickly calculate 2.5% of $600? Yes. $15. So this person's zakah is not even $15, more like $14 or something, because it's $588. That's the nisab. So let's say he had this much, then that's how much. But if he had 1,000, then he will pay $25 for every 1,000 that he had for the entire year. Okay, now this thing is important to keep in mind because some of our kids may have savings that may be more than $588. If they do, then they have to pay zakah from that. Okay? Or you have to pay zakah on their behalf, but you should say, well, this is your money, and this is how much zakah you have to give. So you teach them, and you help them, and you train them to give their own zakah. All right, this is a complicated chart of camels and cows and sheep and crops and all of that. It's just there in case you need to look at it, but I'm going to continue forward. These are the items on which you have to pay 20% of zakah, which is finding a lost treasure, drop money that you found, like you bury, something was buried and you found it. You found a bag full of money and nobody is claiming it, okay? If it is that, then you have to pay 20% zakah, the rest is yours. Gifted lottery, 20%, not 2.5% in this case. All right, now here's a big issue which comes up every year. It wins me some friends, And it hasn't lost me any friends yet, because everybody finds that they have to pay a lot less zakah based on the opinion that I follow. But let's listen. So, no zakah, according to all of the scholars, on jewelry that you use regularly. A woman has, well, men, of course, can have jewelry too, right? But it would be silver, it would not be gold. It would be manly jewelry, it would not be feminine jewelry, okay? So let's say that a person has jewelry and they are using it, personal usage like chain, neck, necklace, earrings, rings, all of these type of things. If they are regularly using it, there's no zakah on it according to any scholar. The problem is that the vast majority of the jewelry that our women tend to have is something that they don't regularly use. Correct or incorrect? Now, do they intend to sell it? They don't intend to sell it. They will never sell it, okay? They say that this is for a rainy day, but on a rainy day, they will ask you to borrow money from someone, but they will not give you their jewelry, most cases. Some women do, but generally, it would be easier for them to cut off their finger than to give this jewelry that their mom gave them at their wedding and stuff like that, which is understandable. So now, this jewelry falls in a gray area where this is not merchandise, which is they did not buy this jewelry in order to sell to make a profit. In that case, there's zakah on it, okay? If it's more than the nisab and 1 year has passed, then you have to give zakah on any jewelry that you bought with the intention of making money from it by selling it. The gray area is that jewelry which you bought for personal use, but you don't actually use it. It's been sitting in whatever that locker is, or wherever it is that you have it hidden. It's been sitting there for years and years untouched. Maybe on a big wedding, you pulled out 2 new items and you wore it, and that's it. What's the ruling on that? So, the Hanafi opinion is that zakah must be paid on that jewelry that is not worn regularly. So that's why most people that come from the Indian subcontinent, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they pay zakah on all of their jewelry basically, because they follow this Hanafi opinion, which is if you're not regularly wearing it, you got to pay zakah on it. The second opinion is a strong opinion, and it is supported by the Malikis, the Shafi'is, and the Hanbalis. That's A for Imam Ahmad, one of the opinions, that there is no zakah on jewelry which is bought for personal use. Even if you're not using it, there's no zakah on it if you bought it for personal use. They say, for example, to make you understand that if you bought a sofa to put in your upstairs living room, you never really use that much, but you don't intend to sell it and make money from it, do you have to pay zakah on it? You don't. You have tools in your house, you have utensils and pots in your house that you have probably not touched in years. Do you pay zakah on it? No. They say that jewelry which is bought for personal use is just like that. There's no zakah on it. Well, like we said, it's like cultural practice of buying jewelry and selling it is like death. Now, the third opinion is the opinion that makes a lot of sense, and it is the opinion that is the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah and one of the opinions of Imam Ahmad from the Hanbali school. That is that jewelry that you buy for personal use, you pay zakah on it once. Then the rest of your life, as long as you don't intend to sell it, you don't pay zakah on it. Okay? If you pay on it once, now it is yours to keep, and there's nothing that you have to give from it in zakah. Is that clear? Okay? Now, what is their evidence? Their evidence is that one day the Prophet ﷺ saw Aisha radiallahu anha wearing a ring of gold. And the Prophet ﷺ said to her, "O Aisha, have you paid zakah from this?" Now they said, if the Prophet ﷺ just saw her wearing it for the first time, obviously it hasn't been there for a year. So why did the Prophet ask her, did you pay zakah on this? So they said, and there are other evidences as well, but they said that this means that you pay zakah on jewelry once, and then it is good for you for the rest of your life, as long as it's for personal use. Now, 10 years later, you decide, man, I bought this jewelry for $200, and now it is worth $200,000. I could sell this jewelry and buy a house. So you say, okay, you know what? I'm going to start asking around. You intend that now I'm going to sell this. So you start calling up jeweler places, and they're giving you a price, but you're not satisfied. So every few weeks you call somebody, you say, hey, how much would you give it to me? They're not giving you a satisfactory price to your liking. While you're doing this, while you intended to sell it on, let's say, January 1st or Muharram 1st, and while you were looking for a good price and you didn't find it, Muharram 1st of next year came. Now, in this year, this jewelry that you intended to sell was considered a type of merchandise. In this case, if 1 year passed, you have to now pay zakah on it, on whatever the amount is that you intended to sell. All right. There's no zakah on gems and stones as of now, which is pearls, precious stones, coral, amber, all of these type of things. But some of the scholars, they're saying that this might need to be updated because the way the world has changed, and somebody could basically convert all of their assets into diamonds and say, I don't have to pay zakah on it. And that's not the intended meaning of this ruling. Okay? So they might consider, maybe fatwa councils, they might say, well, you know what? There needs to be zakah on items which are used like jewelry, like diamonds and things of this sort, so that people are not deceiving the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Impure gold, simple, calculate the zakah on pure gold only. So let's say you have a ring. This ring is 75% pure. I don't know what it's called, like 12 karat, 14 karat, whatever it is. So you basically will only calculate zakah on the pure gold part of it. Usually they have to mix some other metal into it in order to give it strength or design or things of that sort. If that other metal is not zakatable, then you will only pay on the pure part of the gold, not on that impurity that is there. Now, some of the modern issues that we have, number one is salaries. Essentially, there's no zakah on your salary. If whatever money you're making, if you're making, mashallah, some of you making millions of dollars in salaries, right? I can see from the facial expressions who is actually making that. So, whatever money you're making, if it's your salary, a lot of people think that if you make $100,000, you have to give 2.5% of that. That's not correct. If you make $100,000 and you spend $100,000, zero zakah. If you make $100,000 and you spent $80,000 in the year, 20 got saved, that 20 has to sit for 1 year, then you would give 2.5% zakah on that. Okay? Very simple. So any of your salary does not have an impact. Only thing that you pay zakah on is that which is left over for at least 1 year it's been sitting there. Now, issue of the biggest question that a lot of people have is retirement funds. Okay? Remember, the first rule that we mentioned is that zakah is only applicable to money which is accessible. So if your retirement account right now says $200,000, but if today you went and you wanted to withdraw it, after taxes and penalty, you will only get $150,000. So in this case, the 50 that you're going to lose is not even in the formula of your zakah calculation. You would only calculate it on 150. Now, the second question that comes is, do I need to pay zakah on it every year? And that's a big question. And the modern scholars, they have two schools on this matter. And, Sheikh Joe Bradford, Sheikh Ma'an al-Qudha, Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, they have different opinions on this. Some of them, they say that you have to pay zakah every year on that amount which is accessible to you. So out of 200, if you would get 150 on your zakah due date, after removing everything, you have to pay zakah on it. The other school says, no, this money, yes, it is theoretically accessible, but the whole idea is that they are penalizing you a big amount for accessing it until you reach the age of retirement. So it's kind of like this money is locked away and you will not pay zakah until you withdraw. And if you withdraw, so obviously, let's say you reach the age of retirement, whatever, 65, and now you start to withdraw $5,000 a month. Most cases, this $5,000 has been sitting there for many years. So when you withdraw $5,000, what do? You pay 2.5% zakah, and you use the rest. Okay, every time you withdraw, you could do it in this way. Another way is that once you reach retirement age and all of this money is now accessible to you without any penalty, at this point you would pay a hefty amount. Okay, now, us imams, we don't have retirement funds, so we don't need to worry about it. Okay, and I tell you another interesting point. The person who doesn't have a retirement fund doesn't know the pain of paying zakah on a retirement fund. Agree or disagree? So if you ask any imam who is not an expert in this field, he says, pay zakah on it all. What does he care? He doesn't have one. He doesn't know that, man, I can't even access this money, and I have to pay like $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 sometimes every year. So he doesn't really feel your pain. So you need to make sure that you go to someone who actually understands the field very well, and also ideally has some own skin in the game so they can feel your pain, right? Because if a person, that's why they say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not send angels as messengers, because the people will say, you're telling us to fast and you don't even feel hungry. It's easy for you to tell us don't commit haram because you don't even feel the desire to commit haram. So when you ask questions from someone about a matter, you should understand that, does this person really understand what I am going through or not? If they don't, then their question might not be realistic for you. Okay? So if you have a significant amount, you might want to contact an expert and get their opinion. And he mentions both of these and he explains them in this book as well. All right. We talked about zakah already on debt, which is that if you're expecting it back, then you give it. Now, with investment debts, you only deal with the amount that is due this year and calculate everything accordingly. Okay, so somebody says, look, man, I own a house which is, $300,000. And my total assets are $200,000. According to this calculation, I am in default by $100,000. Is this correct or incorrect? It's incorrect. Why is it incorrect? You're not liable for the $300,000 this year. You're only liable for maybe $15,000 this year. So what you can do is when you calculate your zakah, you can minus $15,000, that which is due for this year, and then pay your zakah. You cannot deduct the entire amount, which is not even due right now, so it doesn't really have any practical implications on your finances. That would be cheating the system. We talked about merchandise treated like cash, change of intention. We talked about that. If at any point something you don't want to sell it as personal use, but the point that you intend to sell it and 1 year passes, then you would have to pay zakah on it. Now, how do you pay zakah? The first thing is paid when it's due. Don't delay. If it's late, you must pay ASAP. Okay, don't wait for Ramadan. Don't wait for Dhul Hijjah. When it is due, paid as soon as possible. If you were delayed for some reason, paid as soon as possible. Now, one of the questions that comes up is that, Imam, I pay, let's say, $2,500 a year in zakah, and there's a family back home that I support with $200 every month. If I send this cousin of mine $2,500 in one shot, he's going to blow it all, and he's going to ask me for more money. His expenses are just enough that when I send him $200 a month, he's able to cover his expenses, the house is able to run, and it works out very well. Now, how could I hold the zakah money? Right? Meaning, if I say, okay, 2,500 zakah, I put it in a bank account, I say every month this guy is going to get $200. Now you're delaying the payment of your zakah. So what's the way to do it is to not do it after, but do it before. Okay, which is that you project your zakah that, okay, from this year until next year, I have roughly about this much assets. I will be paying about $2,500 in February of 2026, let's say. So you know what? I'm going to, with the intention, this is a zakah eligible recipient, and with the intention that I'm prepaying my zakah, I start sending him $200 a month from the zakah which is going to be due. So when my zakah due date comes, I have completed the amount as opposed to I'm just starting the amount. Understand? So pay it in advance, but don't delay paying it. If one pays it early to a non-deserving recipient, it would not count. If one pays it early to a deserving recipient, then that person died and no longer needs it and becomes or in anything that happens, but at the time that you gave it, he was eligible, then it would count for you. Okay? So meaning, person prepaid his zakah by 6 months to a person. That person took the money, and that person invested it, and by the time your zakah due date came, that guy is richer than you now. So in this case, zakah counts or doesn't count? What do you think? It counts. That's what it says. It says, if he no longer needed it, but when you gave it to him, he was eligible at that time, then the zakah will count. If the person's capital is ruined after paying it, you cannot ask for it back. You gave somebody zakah. Let's say you gave him $5,000 for zakah, and then God forbid some other calamity comes on you and you become completely ruined and now you need help. And you go back to him and say, hey, I gave you $5,000. Can I have it back? You cannot do that. Okay, once you gave it, it's now his property and not your property anymore. Where to pay your zakah is a big question again. It is not allowed to transport zakah to a land far enough that it would be permissible to shorten the prayer unless one does not find anyone to take it who deserves it in his own area. Okay, so this is the ruling from Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi, who's writing about 800 years ago. At that time, they're saying from Austin to Houston, it's not permissible to send your zakat to Houston, let alone anywhere else. Because if it's a distance where your salah can be shortened, you cannot send your zakah there unless there are no poor people in the area where you live in. Now, in their time, the world was a different place. In our time, the world is a different place. In our time, we are now, number one, able to quickly send money back and forth. We are aware of what's happening. Also, we are spread all over the world in the sense that at that time, Muslims used to live among Muslims. Non-Muslims used to live among non-Muslims. And there was a Muslim land and there was a non-Muslim land. And there was all of these different things. Now, in our time, things have changed. And we know that, for example, that when it comes to giving sadaqah or zakah, our relatives that are deserving have a priority. Now, if my relative is in Syria or Afghanistan or Sudan or somewhere else in the world, do I prefer my relative or do I prefer my locality? This is the question, and this is where there's a lot of, you could say, discussion among the scholars, but of course they say that you give it where the need is greater. You give it where the need is greater. So But at the same time, you should not ignore your locality. You should not ignore your locality. So what a person, it's a very hard decision, honestly. I tell you personally that it's not an easy decision. Do you give it locally? Because there are lots of local needs. And there are lots of international needs as well. So perhaps what a person can do is split it up. Give some here, give some to the relatives, give some to those places where there's a major natural disaster, like, earthquakes and floods and things of that sort. So it should not be, I think, either or, that you only give it there or you only give it here. Some people have this idea that in America there are no poor people, and that is not correct. There are lots of poor people, and there are lots of, although America promises a lot of opportunity, there are people that are locked away from that opportunity. And think about, for example, a single mother who has a number of kids and no one supporting them financially. How hard it is for her to go and get a good paying job when she spent all her life taking care of these kids, being the housewife, and now after like this many years of marriage with the little kids, husband divorced her and left. And sometimes people, they go overseas, they don't even pay like child support or anything like that, so she's on her own. So how can she access the wealth of America when she has to take care of these kids? She doesn't have access to, decent child care, things of this sort. So this is not true. And there are many other cases like that. I was listening to a lecture yesterday about, how some of the inner city neighborhoods in America, we were discussing, I was teaching a class to some Muslim high schoolers. We were discussing masajid in America. Okay? Interesting point. Masajid, which are opened and maintained by immigrant communities, are big, beautiful mega masajid. And the African American Muslim brothers, they are usually struggling to maintain a small shack, if that, in the inner cities. Every city generally has a small African American masjid, which is in very dilapidated condition. Vast majority of the times, they cannot afford to have a full-time professional imam. And you go there, you feel like you went back in time. And then you go just maybe a few miles away, the immigrant masjid, and you see the mega structure and all of those type of things. So there is a lot of disparity because of reasons. So zakah, of course, we're not talking about zakah and masajid. That's a different discussion. But there are poor people right here around us. Who do you give zakah to? Very quickly. By the way, we are over our time. So if anybody needs to leave, please feel free to do so. Who do you give zakah to? So zakah, nowadays, most people, they'll just give zakah to an organization or a masjid, to give it to an organization. Now, it is your responsibility to give it to someone, whether an individual or a group of individuals or an organization, that they have earned your trust that they're actually doing a good job with the zakah. And you have the right to ask them, brother, can you tell me like how much zakah you have collected over last year? Have you paid it all out? Like there was this one time where we had a Muslim brother and he passed away in a different masjid, of course, not over here, passed away, and they needed like $1,200 to pay for his janazah, and the masjid was sitting on $40,000 of zakah money from last Ramadan. Okay, so in a case like this, a person should not give their zakah money to this masjid because that money needs to go out. Okay, it needs to be given out. Now, if the masjid says, well, you know what, hold on, don't judge us. We have this plan, we are supporting these causes, and they need monthly payments. All of it has been already designated to go here. It's just that we have a time schedule. Okay, that's understandable in some way. But if that's not the case, it's just sitting and waiting, you're supposed to go out and work hard to find. There are plenty of people, it needs to go out. Okay, so if they are sitting on it, if their overhead cost is too high, What is a reasonable overhead cost? Think about it, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave out of 8 categories. One of them, He said, that وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا, those people who are collecting the zakah and distributing it. So 1/8 of the 8 categories is the people who are working for zakah, all of the entire structure. So how much percentage is 1/8? What is it? 12%. Okay? So 12%. So that basically means that essentially organizations should not have an overhead more than 12%. That makes sense? Now, this is not black and white. It's in the sense that organizations that are making millions of dollars, raising millions of dollars, they can say our overhead is only 6%. But even their 6% might be $6 million. Okay? And another organization is only raising $300,000-$400,000, but they have a full-time employee, and when you just put that there, it ends up coming out to like maybe 18-20% or more, and it's a little bit, lopsided. So a little bit more research is needed, but what I'm saying is that don't just give blindly, but ask questions, and ideally, if you have recipients, direct recipients, give it to them. Give it to them directly. The first type are the poor and those who don't afford what they need through earning or otherwise. The second type are the needy, those who afford some of their needs, but they're not enough. Okay, so the first one is someone who is always underwater. Their expenses are 1,000, their earnings are 800. The masakin, or it could be the other way around, there's some difference on that, are those people whose expenses are 1,000, their income is 1,200. They are just just making it through, but now their car broke down for which they need $400. It's a specific need. Now this is a needy person because of a certain need. You could give it to them according to their need. The third is a zakah worker, those who collected and those who distributed, meaning all the people that are hired for it, and they can be paid. Again, we talked about that. The fourth type are those whose hearts are to be reconciled. وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ, the authorities within their tribes who are hoped that by giving them, their evil will be availed, or their faith will be strengthened, or they may help protect the Muslims, or help them collect zakah from those who withhold it. In our time, this has a lot of, again, modern implications. Okay, some of the scholars have said that this category might be applicable to those politicians that by giving them money, we might make them more Muslim friendly. Okay, meaning that guy is like, man, I'm getting a lot of political donations from the Muslim community, so let me not like shamelessly stand against them and say the Muslim ban and this and that. So if we have, of course, the other group, they do that. They have bought all the politicians through money, and no one is willing to stand up and say anything against them, even though privately they say, we know this is wrong, but publicly, if we say anything, they're going to spend so much money on our opponent that we're going to lose office, so I can't say it publicly. The fifth type are slaves, the contracted slaves, and may also be used in freeing other slaves. The sixth are those who are in debt, who borrowed money for themselves to afford permissible things or to reconcile between two Muslim parties. So again, this is not to give to those people who are borrowing money for luxuries and being mismanagers, mismanaging the money and just spending on things which are not really their need, or even haram things. Somebody went on a nice credit card vacation and now comes back and says, brother, can you give me zakah? I need to pay off my loan. Okay, this is not for that. This is for those who borrowed money for themselves to afford permissible, reasonable things, and now they're not able to pay back. You can give them money to pay off that debt. The seventh type is in the cause of Allah, which is again an open fi sabilillah. In the time of the Prophet, they used to use this to support the armies. In our time, the army is not the same in the sense that what brings protection to the rights of the Muslims might be political campaigns, okay? Media campaigns. That might be something which is kind of like working the job of protecting the rights of Muslim minorities in non-Muslim lands. So again, there's a bit of discussion on that. The eighth is the wayfarer, which is a traveler, the one who lacks the means to go back home, even if he was well off in his homeland, but he ran out of money for some reason or doesn't have access, you can give them zakah. It's permissible to pay one person all of your zakah, or pay multiple people some of your zakah. How much are to be given? The poor and the needy are given what is sufficient for their needs. So if the needy person needed $500, you cannot give him $1,000. You have to give him $500 from the zakah only. The rest you have to give to others. The worker, the one who is working in it, can get a fair recompense for his work. Okay, so if this person was a high-level chartered accountant before he was asked to work for the Zakah Foundation or Zakah organization, he was making a salary of, let's say, $250,000 a year. Is it reasonable for him to be paid a similar salary from the money of zakah? Yes? No? It says no? Okay, so you are saying that you bring the best people to work to establish a best system, but pay them peanuts. Yes? That's not how it works. So fair recompense is what they deserve from their experience, their education, their field. If they were earning something outside this much, you can give them that much. But of course, you have to now, usually you would do that when you say, look, we have a multi-million-dollar operation, and we need somebody who is so good that they can take our operation to the next level. So you give them the salary that they deserve, even more than that, in order to entice them to come and work here so that you can actually establish the system of zakah properly. Because unfortunately, right now, the system is not so good. And the people that are working there, if you ask them, okay, if you are not the CEO of this charity organization that you started with your brother and your wife and your friend as the board members, what was the job that you were doing before? Okay, how much were you earning there, and how much of a salary are you getting now? The answers will scare you and will make you not be able to sleep with all the money that you may have given to some of the organizations. Don't think too hard about it, otherwise you won't be able to sleep. The one whose heart is to be reconciled is to be given what will reconcile him. In some cases, the Prophet ﷺ gave massive amounts to certain people who the Prophet ﷺ needed them to be an ally. And some of the Ansar, they saw that and they said, Ya Rasulullah, we are the ones who fought with you and died for you. And you're giving massive amounts to these guys who are not even fixed in their alliance with Muslims. Like someday they are here, someday they are there. So the Prophet ﷺ said, I'm giving them the dunya, and for you, there's Jannah. And he said, for them, they're going home with these sheep and cattle. You are going home with the Messenger of Allah. So the Ansar said, this is a good deal and we accept. So the contracted slave, the debtor, they can be given what they need to pay off. The fi sabilillah is whatever is needed. The wayfarer, enough for him to get back to his money, his homeland. None of them may be given more than that. 5 of them will not take except in case of need. These are the poor, the needy, the contracted slave, the debtor, and the wayfarer. The 4 of them they can be given even if they are well off. And that is the zakah worker, the one to be reconciled, the one who is in fi sabilillah, and the debtor who borrowed money to reconcile between disputants. Okay, so there's a debtor who borrowed money for personal needs. He can only be given as much as needed. But the other people, they can be given, even though they might be millionaires by their own account, but you can still give them from zakah money if they are qualifying to be one of these 4 people in this category. Who should not be given? And we are almost done. Okay, we're going to skip this so you can watch it later. Must intend, whenever you give zakah, you must have the intention that you're giving zakah. You cannot say, well, you remember the money I gave you as a gift last week? Well, it's zakah. No. When you give it, you have to intend in your heart that this is my zakah. Do you have to tell that person that this is zakah? No, you don't have to. Okay? Now, the only time you need to maybe have a conversation is that there are some people who are not supposed to be given zakah. And they are, number one, the family of the Prophet. So you could ask them, hey, are you from the family of the Prophet? He says, yes. In this case, you cannot give them your zakah. You have to help them as part of the budget of the community. Okay, meaning, going back to the time of the Prophet, a rich Muslim is giving zakah to the Prophet's family is not befitting the role of the Prophet ﷺ, but rather they should take it as their own opportunity, as their own responsibility. If it's given to someone who's not deserving, it will not be sufficient except to someone that he thought was poor. So if you give it to someone who was not eligible to receive zakah, then this will not count as your zakah unless you thought that he was eligible, but he wasn't. Okay, so you have to do your due diligence, and you have to make sure that you're giving to someone who is actually deserving of it. Do taxes substitute zakah? The answer is no. But there's no problem in giving zakah to a non-profit and deduct that from your taxable income. That could count as charity. Of course, you're giving zakah anyways. Even if you exceeded the category of deductions, you still have to give it. But there's no problem in deducting that because, again, we want to give taxes, that which we have to, but we don't have to give more than that. It's not any praiseworthy thing, even in the American system, to pay more taxes than you have to. So whatever you can do to minimize your taxes, legally, go ahead and do that. But zakah has to be given, and you cannot say, well, I paid this much in taxes, so I can just deduct the zakah. Zakat al-Fitr, inshallah, we'll discuss later when the time of Zakat al-Fitr comes later in Ramadan. So inshallah, we'll stop here tonight. Subhanakallahumma.